Hey guys, Chi here. So if you found this video, I'm guessing that you or maybe someone you know may have recently torn their Achilles tendon, what they call the Achilles tendon rupture. And you're hoping to find some information and things from someone that may have already gone through it. So I'm hoping this can serve as a useful reference point for others, and I'll be providing a video journey of my recovery and my rehab process, and just some helpful tips and advice along the way. So I really just want to create this video series to inspire other athletes that may be looking to recover from this injury and return to their sports, return to sports in general, and at a competitive level. So in terms of a bit of the background, this is actually the second time that I've torn an Achilles tendon. I tore my left one about 2 years ago playing basketball. Had surgery, went through full physio. About a year after that, I started playing basketball again for almost about a full year, and then recently, I'd say a week ago, I was playing basketball outside with some friends, and I tore my right Achilles tendon this time. So the left one that was repaired, and I was able to play again. That was fine, but then this time it was my other leg that got injured. And so I think that at this point, I think I have quite a bit of insight and experience in going through this. And because it's my second time, I thought that, why not? Why not create some sort of video journal or content that I can help try to inspire and provide some information for others going through the same thing. I'll start off the video by giving a little bit of hope and good news, and which I just talked about, is that you are able to make a full recovery from this. Now, the strength in your calf and your Achilles on the side that was injured and is after you heal it may not be to the same level as you had before. But in my case, I put in a lot of work. I did a lot of physio, and I'd say my strength probably returned to close to like, it was probably like 90 to 95% where it was, and I was still strengthening it. So, I have no doubt that I could have gotten it close to 100% again. So here are some clips I had in my phone. So this was after I had recovered from my left Achilles repair, doing some clean and jerks here. Here are some deadlifts. So I was able to get a lot of my strength back to close to where I was before I hurt myself, like I said. And I was able to just get some footage of me when I was in Taiwan, just playing around here. Some hardened step backs. And I have some clips here as well where I was practicing my vertical. I am taking off with 2 legs or 2 feet instead of 1. So I'm not able to give you as good of a sense of what it was like between the power difference, but you get a lot of your strength back. That's the good news. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there's gonna be quite a bit of work that you're gonna have to do to go through that in order to gain that strength back. This video or this video series is not gonna be necessarily an inside scoop on how like the Lakers doctors helped Kobe Bryant recover from his Achilles tendon rupture and repair, or how like the Brooklyn Nets helped Kevin Durant get back into form after his Achilles tendon rupture. But I'm gonna try my best to show you what I go through, get as much information and resources for you, and just go from there. So I'll start off with a bit of background. My name is Chi. I'm 34 years old, living in Toronto, Canada. I played a lot of sports throughout my life. Grew up playing baseball, basketball, even like volleyball and football in high school as well. But for the most part, seriously into baseball and basketball. So for baseball, grew up playing rep, throughout my life, and then went to university, played 4 years for the Western baseball team in university. Basketball was great growing up as well because I was able to play a lot of pickup, and then I played in leagues as well, and those leagues started in the fall and winter, whereas baseball were summer leagues. So I was able to kind of play both sports without interrupting each other. And I would say that since I graduated school, over 10 years ago, I haven't really played baseball since then, because to join a league, there's a lot of time commitment. There's a lot of things that just go into being able to play baseball, whereas basketball, you can just find a friend, go to an outdoor court, or find some pickup runs, and it's a lot easier to just get things going. And so ever since university ended and I graduated, I feel like I've just been mostly playing basketball for the last 10 or 12 years. So I guess we'll move on to the discussion point number 2. So we'll talk about the injury and the hospital and what to expect on that end. So the injury. So I was playing basketball with 2 of my friends in an outdoor court. We had just started playing. I don't know if I fully warmed up as much as I should have. And then we hopped into King's Court. So we suddenly started playing one-on-ones. And because I'm very competitive, I just want to use some different moves and things like that and just play. And the move that I used was a bit aggressive, especially for your Achilles and things like that, because you are loading it up. So essentially, like, I drove on the right side, I pulled it back, and I kind of like hesitated and faked like a shot. And so while they kind of like bit, when I pulled back, I'm like loading my legs and then just pushing and exploding as soon as they bite on that. And when I did that, my back leg, my right leg kind of pushed off, but you do kind of this bounce jump and then you push. And when I pushed off, I felt like a pop, like a slap in the back of my leg, like someone slapped you with a wet towel or your hand at the back of your leg, or you felt like someone hit you with a basketball if they just kind of threw a basketball at the back of your calf, or someone tripped over your leg. It didn't feel that painful because you have adrenaline running, you're about to drive. It didn't feel like anything that's like, oh man, like that hurts so much. But you do look behind you after you feel that, because you're like, wait, was there a loose basketball behind me? Someone hit me with a basketball, or someone ran into my leg off a screen? Like, what happened? But you look behind you and no one's there. And so I think that's usually a moment that's like, okay, it's usually an indication of an Achilles tendon rupture. So when I did it on my left leg 2 years ago, it was during a bachelor's party. A bunch of my friends came up from San Francisco to Montreal, so I met them in Montreal. They rented out the McGill University gym, and so we played basketball in the McGill University gym for like 2 hours. And it was probably at the end of the 2 hours, that time, I jumped up to kind of get an interception. I was running backwards. I jumped up to get an interception, and when I landed and pushed off right away. It's kind of like whenever I get rebounds, as soon as I land, I'm like exploding. I'm doing a fast, like a fast break as fast as I can. And in those situations, I was like jumping up backwards. So I think I was already in a compromised position. And when I landed, my leg was also like fully stretched out, and I tried to explode for a fast break. And that time, same thing. I felt like a slap in the back of my left leg. I looked behind me, no one was around me. So I was like, okay, well, who hit me? How did I feel that? And then at that point, I had a full rupture. So my foot was kind of like no longer attached to my leg by my tendon, my calf. So I had no strength to be able to motivate. So to be able to move it. So my foot kind of just collapsed and I fell onto the ground. And in that time, I had a friend of mine, Matt, who I used to work in investment banking in the States with. He also tore his Achilles tendon when I was living with him around that time back in the day, and he was recovering from that. And so when it happened, luckily he was there, and he came and he was like, hey, like, what did you feel? What happened? And he told me exactly like what he felt, and it was too spot on identical to what I had felt. So I was like, oh no, like, did I rupture my Achilles as well? So anyways, back to present day. Once I felt that tear on my right leg and I was on the ground, and I knew from experience from the first time what it felt like, so I knew I had torn this Achilles. I took a second, like on the court, I was on the ground for like 30 seconds, a minute, maybe even longer. You'll have to ask like Parks or James who's there. But I had to just take a second to really take some deep breaths and just understand and realize that I'm about to go through this recovery process or this ordeal all over again.
Another one.
So it definitely was one of those reality checks. And then afterwards, I think I was just able to accept the fact that I'm going to have to go through this again. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to play basketball again, because that's how much I love playing sports. But it does mean that, I'm going to be stuck in this situation again. Now, in terms of Achilles tendon ruptures, when you go online or you talk to your doctor, they basically say that Achilles tendon ruptures are most often seen in what they call weekend warriors. I don't know if I love that term, But essentially, weekend warriors are, they consider typically people that are middle-aged, between the age of 30 and 50 years old, and are recreational athletes participating in sports on their spare time. So now, this makes a lot of sense because I guess that really categorizes me. I'm 34 years old. My job, I'm a partner at a design studio, so we work at desks all day. We just work on computers, and right now during quarantine, I'm working from home. So I'm really not getting much exercise. All the gyms are closed. I'm not getting much exercise. And then, you know, once quarantine was semi-lifted and the courts were open, 2 or 3 months of not really exercising much, maybe doing some workouts at home and with friends at home in home gyms, I went and started playing basketball. So I probably set myself up in a bad situation there as well. And if you're watching this video, make sure that you don't do that. If you have the opportunity, make sure you stretch, make sure you prepare yourself, make sure if you're jumping back into anything like that, take your time. Don't play anything too competitive or too aggressive right away. But essentially, yeah, so this happens quite a bit. So my doctor told me this happens quite a bit in people, you know, between the age of 30 to 50 that still play a lot of sports and like to play competitive sports. And this happens more often in sports that require a lot of explosive, quick bursts of movement. So whether that's running and jumping in basketball, it happens a lot in, which is what happened to me, but it happens in volleyball, which happens to a lot of my friends, and then also tennis as well as another sport. I mean, I'm sure there are other sports as well, but these are the common ones. So once I got injured and, you know, everything kind of set in, I knew that I had to go to the ER, and that's what I recommend as well. If you tear your Achilles, there's a few range of spectrum between like just spraining your Achilles all the way to a full rupture where you've torn your full tendons. And you know, the spectrums in between is like a partial tear and things like that. Wherever you are in that spectrum, I recommend going to the emergency room, going to the ER, going to your hospital, and getting them to check it out. Because depending how severe it is, you could worsen it and damage it more if you just try to keep walking or keep playing sports. If you got injured on the court and you decide to, you know, try to walk it off and keep playing.
Stop it. Get some help.
Don't do that. You know, I beg of you, go to the hospital, get it checked out. Once you go to the ER room, you go see a doctor, there's a few things that they're gonna do for you to do a test. They're gonna ask you first what happened. And if you explain to them, like, if same things what happened to me, like you're usually loading up your legs, or you're doing a really quick step off, you're about to sprint, and you're just doing a really hard push off, and then you hear snap or slap, and you feel that kind of sensation, and then you're not able to kind of point your toes too much, things like that, they're gonna know that it's an Achilles tendon rupture, but they usually will have to test anyways. And so there's 2 tests that they can run for you. They did both for the first time I did it and this time as well. The first one's called a Thompson test. So they're gonna get you to lie face down on a table or on like a bed, and just have your feet dangling off the bed. And when your feet's dangling off the bed, they're gonna squeeze your calf. And so I'll kind of show you here. When you squeeze your calf, you're gonna get a little bit of this like twinge with your feet. And that means that your calf is connected to your feet, usually through your Achilles tendon. So when you're squeezing it, you're just kind of like, it's spasming your leg and it moves it up. Now, they're gonna test that on the leg that was injured, and when they squeeze that leg, if your feet's not moving at all and not responding to any squeezes in your calf, then there's a good chance that you've had a full Achilles rupture. If they squeeze it and you get some movement and things like that, maybe you've only had a partial rupture, which is actually better in some cases. So I think once they realize that, you know, you've torn your Achilles, they're gonna use a Thompson test to check it. The other test they'll do is actually just like a manual test. I don't remember the name of it, but they're gonna feel up the back of your Achilles from the calf, the heel where it's connected all the way up. And they're just gonna feel that Achilles tendon and see if there's any gaps or see if there's any areas where it feels very thin. And so in those thin areas, it may just mean that you've had a bunch of threads of your Achilles tendon torn, but some are still intact. So your Achilles tendon kind of look like a bunch of strings and then wound up. So think they're a bunch of threads all connected and just kind of circling each other down. And so when you tear when you rupture your Achilles tendon or tear it, sometimes it might just be one strand, like one or a few strands that are torn, but you still have a bunch of strands intact. So you're gonna feel very sore, but you'll still be able to kind of use your foot. Now, other times, for example, me, my Achilles tendon completely tore. So there's actually a gap in between the two Achilles tendons. So there's really not gonna be much responsiveness or movement when you actually try to use your foot in that case. So when that happens, they're going to want to confirm that. So they're going to either send you to imaging, which they'll do an ultrasound, which is what I did in my case, or they might do an MRI. So it really depends on your doctor, your hospital, what they recommend. I believe ultrasounds are cheaper. I'm based in Canada, so everything was covered under healthcare. But if you're in the States, you might want to, you have an option. You might want to opt for ultrasound because it will be cheaper than an MRI. Now, once I went to imaging, I had someone with an ultrasound, and it's like one of those ultrasounds with the jelly as well, what they use for pregnant women to see the baby. So I had one of those, had me lay on my stomach on a bed with my feet off the table, similar to the Thompson test position, and he just used that ultrasound kind of pen and just went up and down the back of my leg to get the imaging. And after he did that, he did show that it was a full rupture. And I had about 2.5 centimeter gap between my tendons. So same thing as the last time as my other side, I did rupture it fully. So now once you have your ultrasound and they can confirm that this was a rupture, they're going to set you up with an appointment with the fracture clinics. And so the fracture clinic here at the Toronto Western Hospital, which is where I went to, is basically run by orthopedic surgeons. So those are the people that would be performing surgery on you if you needed it. So they'll set you up an appointment with them. Ideally, try to get it the same day. If you're in the ER room and they have time, go to the fracture clinic and get an appointment. If not, which is my case, they sent me home. And once they sent me home, they got the specialist and their assistants to call me to set up an appointment with the fracture clinic or with my orthopedic surgeon that they recommend. And so when they send you home, before they send you home, they're gonna give you two things. One, they're gonna wrap your feet up into a cast. I have an air cast boot here, which is gonna be different probably than what you're gonna get. They're gonna just give you a standard, fiberglass cast or some sort of cast or splint that essentially makes sure that your foot is pointed down, so it's in a resting plantar flexion position. So if your foot's at 9 degrees and you're standing straight up, that's just 9 degrees. Plantar flexion is a whole range of motion between 90 and your toes pointed completely down. So that's the plantar flexion, and you want to be set in a splint or a cast at about 20 or 30 degrees plantar flexion. So it feels natural. It's not like you're fully trying to point your toes like a ballerina, but it feels like it's like pointing down and somewhat like natural there. They're gonna splint that up, and because your tendons, if they're torn apart or if they're hurt, the more that you bend here, the further you're kind of stretching your tendons. So when you put your toes pointing down, you're giving your tendons the most amount of slack to stay together. And so if they're hurt and they need to heal, things like that, you don't want to be straining them and be stretching them. You want them to be as close as possible and to let them kind of heal. And so they'll set you in a cast in that kind of position. Or I have an air cast boot, which is a similar thing where I have heel lifts. So my heel is actually pretty high up around here, and my toe is pretty low. So I'm always in kind of that position. So they're gonna give you the cast, and then they're also gonna give you some crutches. And so crutches, I won't show you on this video how to use it. I'm sure they'll just show you at the hospital, but you wanna make sure that you set these up with the proper height on the sides here, so that when you're standing up, it rests comfortably under your shoulder blades. It's not too high where you're kind of like, it's propping you up, and it's not too low where you kind of need to sag down, lean down to get that support. You kind of just want to be comfortable, or it's just in your armpits while you're standing up. And one thing, so when you're getting your cast wrapped up, one tip when you're talking to the nurse or whoever is doing it for you, tell them not to wrap it too tight. 2 years ago when I hurt my left side, they wrapped it really tight, and it felt like if my foot was like this, it felt like they like crunched my toes and my feet together. So my feet started to actually cramp up, and because you're stuck in a cast, you can't stretch it, you can't massage it, you're stuck, and that was really the most uncomfortable part for me. You're not gonna feel much pain once, after you tear your Achilles, and they wrap it up, like you don't even need painkillers. You're not gonna feel pain. You might feel a bit of soreness in your calf, kind of like if you did calf raises and you worked it out and you're a little bit sore the next day. You're gonna have that kind of soreness feeling ongoing for, you know, for a few days up to a week. But you know, if you're used to working out or playing sports, it's not gonna bother you much at all. So the pain isn't there, but if your cast is kind of set improperly or it's too tight, your feet's gonna cramp up and you're gonna feel very, very uncomfortable. And so that was my biggest complaint. And so that's why this time I didn't actually ask them to get a cast. I just said, hey, I already have one of these air cast boots. Can I just use that and point my feet down at a certain angle and just be very careful with it? And they said that was cool. And so I prefer that because I can take the boot off when I'm watching a movie or watching TV and just let it rest. I can, you know, take it off and go in the shower, and I don't need a plastic bag to wrap around my boot to make sure it doesn't, or the cast of the boot doesn't get wet. So for a lot of reasons, I decided I didn't want to cast. I already had a boot from the last time, so I just put myself in that thing and made sure the heel lifts are at maximum height. So your foot is in that resting plantar flexion around 20 or 30 degrees pointed down. And so that's the end of the second section, which is like the injury in the hospital. Now moving on to the next section, which is gonna be your options. And so this is gonna be, you're gonna go meet with your specialist doctor, which is your orthopedic surgeon, the fracture clinic at your hospital. And then once you have an appointment set up, you're gonna be able to talk to them and just figure out what are your options. Now your options are really gonna come down to two. It's either going to be the operative versus the non-operative. And that's like what they can do for you in terms of any Achilles tendon ruptures. And then what that basically comes down to is surgery and no surgery. And I'll try to talk about both sides and the pros and cons. The debate between whether you should do surgery or not do surgery has been ongoing for like 30 plus years between a lot of doctors. So there's a lot of doctors that, you know, prefer one, a lot of doctors prefer the other. But I'll explain to you the main factors that really you should consider. The main things is that if you do surgery, for the most part, your rehab timeline is gonna be cut a little bit shorter. Now, I don't think it'll be a big difference because there's a lot of studies out there that show a lot of early mobilization and weight bearing for no surgery options or more conservative options is showing results similar to having surgery. But I would say that the main things to consider is the timeline, the re-rupture rate, and then also the strength that you're gonna have after everything's healed and everything's back. Now, the re-rupture rates, in the past, there's been studies showing that when you repair your Achilles tendon through surgery, the re-rupture rates are much lower than if you don't repair it. And some of those numbers from different studies that I've seen in medical journals I've looked up, you know, range from like 3 to 4% re-rupture rate if you repair your Achilles. And if you don't repair your Achilles, that number jumps up from around 6 or 7% if you're great with your early mobilization. So those numbers are fairly similar, you know, 4% to like 6%. Or if you aren't good with early mobilization for the non-operative route, that percentage sometimes jumps up to 10 to 14% re-rupture rate. So the re-rupture rate can be much higher if you don't do surgery, but there are a lot of studies now that, you know, if you're really good with physio and you get a lot of the early mobilization and weight bearing for non-surgery, you might be able to recover to a similar rate, to a similar degree as if you repaired it. Now, I'll try to include some of the studies down below so you can look into these medical journals and studies yourself, but at the end of the day, I would talk to your doctor, your surgeon, and talk to him about your personal kind of considerations, your personal circumstances, and ask him for his advice, and you guys should make that decision together. For me, the main three factors, like I was just mentioning, that I took into consideration why I decided to go with surgery for the second time as well is that, one, I'm fairly young, I'm only 34 years old, so surgery and general anesthesia is really not that big of a risk for me. Two, my intention for after recovery is to return to sports. I do want to return to basketball and to play other sports, and ideally I do want to return to play basketball at like a competitive level, or a competitive level for me. And that being said, you know, I don't want to be able to just play casually, recreationally. I want to still play hard. I want to be able to drive to the net. I want to be able to try to do crossovers, quick first steps, hesitations, all that stuff. And so that's a big motivation for me. And so that's why I want to repair it, because the biggest downside for me of not repairing it is that you still have to go through the same time frame for recovery and physio, like 9 months to a year before you can play again. But I don't want to risk the re-rupture rate skyrocketing from, instead of only like 4 or 5% if I repaired it, to that being up north of like 6-7%, all the way up to like 14% if I'm not the best with physio, or if I'm busy or I didn't do early mobilization, whatever the case is. I don't want to risk that and have to go through this process a third time. I've torn both Achilles. I'm going to repair them both, and I've heard that once you repair them, they really get that sucker attached properly, so that ideally you're going to have much lower risk of ever having to rupture them again. So yeah, generally they said if you're younger and more active and looking to return to your sport, it's recommended that you repair your Achilles. If this was a freak accident and you were just doing something that somehow you ruptured it and you don't plan to return to sports, then you can really talk to your doctor and consider not having surgery, because not having surgery is a lot less painful. Because after surgery, your leg is going to be cut open for a few weeks. You're going to have stitches, you're going to have staples in your leg that you're going to remove. It's going to hurt. But it's worth it, trust me. I've gone through it, and it hurts for a little bit, but it's not too bad. So I'd recommend repairing it if you're like me, you're competitive, you want to return back to sports. It just makes it safer, I think. Now, I'm gonna move on to the last talking point for this video, and it's just gonna be helpful tips and advice. I'm not gonna spend too much time here. Feel free to comment down below if you need more help or feedback and things like that, and I'll provide as much information as I can. But I'll just kind of give you a few helpful tips that I think would have really made my life a lot easier if I heard this the first time around. So the first thing is you're gonna have to get some extra patience. And in the upcoming weeks and months, you're really gonna need it, because you're not gonna be able to stand on your two legs for a little bit of time. You're not gonna be able to use weight bearing on your legs, because you're not gonna have a boot as well. You're probably gonna be in a cast. So you're gonna be hopping around, living around, and things are gonna take a lot longer than usual. So for example, taking a shower is gonna be a headache. There's a lot of things that you'll have to deal with when you only have one leg. If you have a bathtub instead of a walk-in shower, I have a walk-in shower, so it's a lot easier for me to get in. But if you have a bathtub, you're gonna have to find a way to carry yourself into the bathtub, or sit yourself in a weird way. And when you're getting out, it's gonna be awkward as well, because you only do have one leg. And so there are some things I'm gonna talk about later on, which I'll include in the description below, that will help you throughout the process. So one of them is for showering. You really need to get yourself a shower stool or something to put in the shower so you can sit on it while you're taking a shower, because you can't stand in the shower. You can get that on Amazon. I'll also include a link in the description. You can also get a bag for your leg, so that you can wrap kind of like this big plastic bag around your cast or your boot if you're not able to take it off. So when you take a shower, you can get it wet without having it soaked. Or you can take a shower without having your leg hanging out the side of the shower, to making sure it doesn't get wet. Another thing in terms of just everything, going to the bathroom, having to sit down in the toilet where you only have one leg, letting yourself down, ideally you have something to hold on to. There's gonna be a lot of things that's just gonna be a bit more frustrating for you. Things are gonna take longer for you to make breakfast, for you to take out garbage, do dishes, do laundry, anything. It's all gonna take a little bit longer, and at times you're gonna get frustrated. And for me at least, it's happened a lot. There's times where I went to grab something from the fridge, and once I took something out of the fridge and I was turning around, the fridge door closed and hit my crutches in my arm, and I dropped everything. There's times where shit's gonna happen, and I think you just gotta laugh at yourself. You gotta laugh about it, and just know that this is gonna be temporary. You're gonna get through it, but try to set your expectations a little bit lower, to understand that life is not going to be super easy in the upcoming weeks and months. But trust me, from someone that's been through it once already and that's going through it right now, it's not that bad, and you'll be able to get over it. You'll be able to handle it. So some things I want to talk to you guys about in terms of things that can help you. And this is advice I wish I knew the last time I tore my Achilles, is you want to get yourself, if you can, a knee rover. And so it's basically a knee scooter. I'm going to show you right now. Hopefully you can see it. I'll actually move the camera with me. So this is a knee scooter. So I'll actually set this up and hopefully you can see what it's like. So essentially it's just a scooter. You put your knee on and it makes life so much easier. So getting around and just doing things from cooking to taking out the garbage to doing anything, it's much easier with this thing. Now I'll say this time I tore my right Achilles tendon, so I can't even drive because my right foot's in a boot or in a cast. So having something like this really helped me out to be able to, get to Ubers or get to the convenience store across the street or things like that. Crutches. For example, for me to go across the street, which is about, I'd say, 150 meters, for me to go crutches across the street and back, I have to stop probably like 2 or 3 times because I get so sore in my hip, my one leg, my arms starting to chafe, things like that. I did one of those missions one time and it took me like 35, 40 minutes on crutches. And I was just in a sweat, I was out of breath by the time I got home. I was just not having fun. Whereas I recently got this knee rover, this knee scooter, and that trip, honestly, I feel like I was actually faster than when I was walking on 2 legs, because on the rover, you're actually making good speed. I would be careful because I had a bit more fun with it because this thing is fun to ride around on, but you want to be careful because like the last thing you want to do is to hurt yourself again. Yeah. So I'm gonna make another video soon just talking about nutrition and talking about like if you're a primary caregiver to yourself like me, where I'm living at home by myself here, you're gonna wanna find different services and things that will help you throughout this injury and transition from surgery and recovery and things like that. Some things to look at is grocery delivery. If you're not able to drive, and even if you are able to drive, you have crutches, or you don't have a knee rover yet, it's gonna be a lot more difficult for you and a lot more of a hassle for you to get groceries and carry groceries. So look for like a grocery delivery service, and I'll talk about one in the next video for people that are in Canada and Toronto. You can also look at food catering services that they'll meal prep food for you, and so that'll be helpful because when you're on one leg, it is just going to be more of a mission to cook and things like that. And so any little help that people can give you throughout the weeks, definitely take it if you're able to. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap up the video with that. This is the first YouTube video I've ever made, so appreciate any feedback or support that you can give me. So please like this video if you found it helpful, or if you're also going through this journey. I'd love if you're able to comment below and just tell me, one, did you have a full Achilles rupture or was it only partial? Did you decide to have surgery? And then also, are you looking to return to sports after having this injury? I'd love to hear your comments and feedback below, to see the community, to see if we can motivate each other to go through this and recover together. Lastly, subscribe to the channel. You'll see updates from me every week as I recover, and I'll try to include my protocol and physio exercises throughout this video series. So for those that may not be able to afford physio or things like that, I'll try to give you some helpful exercises and things that I'm going through on a week-to-week basis as well. And so that's the end of that. So good luck, keep your heads up. This is definitely not the most fun thing to have, especially for an athlete that loves sports and plays a lot of sports growing up or even now. as adults. So yeah, this is Chi signing off, and we'll see you next week.